During the last couple of days, we have, as I say, been celebrating our history, and we've been doing it through both telling an exhibition story, by having historic figures come to life. You may remember that we heard from Samuel Bowman, our parish priest in the mid-19th century, from William Muhlenberg, who was beautifully played by Phil Norris, who really fitted the role of the young whippersnapper, as he told us. We also had Harriet Lane Johnston, who will be familiar to many of you, and someone less familiar, Charlotte Rowe, who is buried in our churchyard and whose footsteps I recently followed in India last week. And then, of course, who could forget General Edward Hand, who was a very imposing figure in more ways than one. And we're going to continue prayerfully reflecting on our history, our gifts and our experiences this weekend, not only through our worship, but through this forum. And we're going to do it today here through the Godly Play method, which Alyssa has very much shared and pioneered in our parish amongst younger people, but also the rest of us. But I want to hand over to Alyssa, who wants to talk about how we're going to take some of this storytelling and recording of our history forward in the coming weeks and months. So, Alyssa, please.
So as we have already been doing, harvesting some of our personal stories into a collective story is one of the things that we are making space for, particularly in the next month. Together, our stories will form a prism that tell some of what life is like in Lancaster and at St. James here at the 275 mark. Notably absent for much of our history, I think as Carl was noting, is that the voice of the average person in the pews is missing. What were their lives like? How did they articulate faith and spirituality? Where did God seem present? Where did God seem absent? What moved them to joy or to sorrow? These are unknowns to us for most of the people of God who have passed through here in our parish's history. So what we are hoping to do is to collect some stories, as we have already been doing in these forums the past couple of weeks, to see what that would give a window into what our life is like. The treasure box that is in front of me here will serve as a symbol that will hold our stories for the next quarter century. Our hope is to do the work of sifting through some of our own personal sacred stories in order to see what is desiring to be told now. Both solitude and community are needed for this. How can we hear one another into speech for the benefit of the teller and the hearer now, and for those who come after us? What is on our hearts and our minds now that would like to be given voice? I, for instance, might tell you about the chapel and the sacredness of that space for me. I might tell you a story that happened towards the end of my first year here, of leading 50 of us in the Stations of the Cross Good Friday, how we began and ended our time of the procession in the chapel, standing before the altar, still decorated from the Maundy Thursday vigil, with the cross of everlasting moss. And how during the 15th station, the station of the resurrection, my husband Jeff received a text from the head of school saying that he had been hired, a text that ended his year-long job search. I might tell you a story from 2 years ago of sitting shoeless on the chapel floor, as is common and will be happening in about 10 minutes, on the feast of St. Hildegard, a German mystic who saw the whole cosmos as being held in the womb of God. And I might tell you how unexpectedly I was greeted by a woman that morning, herself a German immigrant, who just the day before had sold to my family the home that her family had built. I might tell you of the friendship that began that day and for which I'm grateful. I might tell you lighter or sweeter stories, like of the chapel turned cocktail hour at a friend's wedding, or of a new 5-year-old, who I will tell you again refers to the chapel as the cow poop room, because of the unfortunate sewage odor, or of another 5-year-old who could articulate for you with more intelligence than I the phenomenon of black holes in our great cosmos, or of my own children telling sacred stories to other children, Marielle and the Holy Family, or Amelia and the Faces of Easter. I might tell you of the collective calm that mysteriously befalls the community of children, with the lights set to 3, and the wall emanating blue, blue as in Mary's color, and a single candle lit in the center of us. I might tell you how weekly for 8 weeks in the chapel, one winter into spring, a few of you held space for me to be heard into speech as we listened together to the invitation of our loving God in my life. I might tell you all of this and more about how my story and your story and the story of God intersect and take on flesh in this time and in this place. But I might actually write for you on a card that goes into our treasure box. I'm not so sure yet what's on your heart and mind this day. I don't know that either. But I know that there is power in our collective storytelling as we each contribute to this prism and show rays of Christ's presence among us. Our storytelling can take on various forms. It could take the form of a narrative that in just 400 words reveals to you a lot about me and my faith and my family. It could also take the form of a poem, a timeline, an image, as Randy was inviting us to do, bring in images or to identify the images as Leo has invited us to do. The process will begin, or has begun already, in our forums and then over the weekend at our retreat, of inviting you to see what it is that you would like to share with this community. There are very few guidelines. Basically, the guidelines are the questions that Cordelia has already asked. Where do you see yourself in this story? What part of this story is about you? Or it could be, what is it that you like best? Or what is it that we could be leaving out and still have all the story we need? It doesn't have to take place directly on St. James campus, as I just did. I was giving you an example of the chapel as a way of filtering my story, but I could have told you about House Church and how that never happens at the corner of Duke and Orange, and yet is so significant for our family.